Alright guys, you saw part 1, so I won't waste your time. Let's continue the journey of my crazy unicycle build. So here you can see I am testing how sideways it'll go. I turned the cutoff past 45 degrees. I think I had it set around 70 and I was riding it, and then basically in this next clip I messed up and I broke the unicycle. That I lost the clips, that's all I've got. Now you can see the shell is broken. I didn't really take many pictures of it being broken, but that's all I got, and also the axle is bent. So here's the pile of parts that I just salvaged out of my monster, because you know if you've ever crashed a monster, they pretty much just disintegrate. So I got a new shell. I basically got some aluminum extrusions and I cut them up to make a square and just basically screw that on to the axle hanger. And here you can see the initial cuts and things were not sized exactly right. So I just did some more cuts, and I also ended up switching from the monster hangers to the MSP hangers, so I would get more ground clearance as well. And then I just cut some pieces of hardboard and made a box shape out of it. So here it is with the metal mounting plate instead of the 3D printed plastic one, and then I also cleaned up the wiring and I routed it through to the other side. I made a little 3D print that will protect the wires as they pass through. So now here you can see the controller side with the motor spinning. It's all powered up. Now if you remember in the last video I was talking about cutouts that I had under hard braking, and it turned out that happened because the motor connectors on the Stormcore side were soldered incredibly poorly. I ended up blowing the controller, and then when I went to unplug it, instead of disconnecting the bullet connector disconnected from the controller, and so that sucked, but that was probably why I was having the cutouts. So Laxroix, in their niceness, actually sent me a 100D. And here you can see it with the 100D wired up. Unfortunately, I installed it, turned it on, ran the motor, worked good, turned it on again the next day, and the controller just blew up for no reason, and only half of it worked. So no big deal, I just ran it with only half of a controller, and here you can see there is a red light lit up because it's half broken, but it worked fine, just the same as a single Stormcore, so that was alright. But then in the meantime, Trampa actually released their 100-250 and they sent me one as well. So now I'm shilling for them, as well as still willing to shill for Laxroix. They're both cool companies. But this one can do 250 amps continuous, and it will allow for peaks of up to 350. So it's incredibly powerful, and I've only been running it with 200 amps max so far because I don't want to break anything, and it's been working like a champ. And so pretty much immediately after installing it, I torqued my axle nuts loose. I didn't have any Loctite on it, so it was kind of to be expected. And when I had them open, I went in and I repaired the MSP hangers by 3D printing these shims that go in to fill the empty space, because it's a really common failure point. And then after I retorqued them, I also torqued them loose again like 2 days later, so then I really cranked them down, and it's been good ever since. So yeah, that pretty much covers the entire build process. Here you can see Merlin riding it with the Clark pads. He was really helpful, did the machining on the metal parts for me, and yeah, he really likes it, so that's somebody else signing off on it. And let's get straight to the chase. Here is the biggest jump I've ever done on it, and you can see that if I can do this, it definitely works. And again, this is with 200 amps max even on that big jump. I also was able to take it sideways again, and I was also able to ride out of the shallow end of this bowl, which is pretty cool. So here I'm just showing off that if I rotate the wheel, all the balance stays totally flat. The important one is the pitch axis, the roll axis. It's hard for me to control with one hand while I'm filming, so it bobbles around a little, but the important part is you can see it's pretty dialed. So yeah, that's it for the formal part of this video. I'm just going to leave you off with clips of me riding and me ranting instead of music, so I don't get copy striked. So now let's talk about some of the bugs that I brought up last time that I wanted improved. So talked about getting the IMU dialed, and you just saw that I improved the calibration. That made a big difference. Another thing was that there was actually a bug in the LSM60S3 driver that I wrote where it was reading from the IO drivers registers randomly, and the gyro itself was writing to the IO registers at the same time, and so occasionally you'd get scrambled data, and that ended up with a noisy signal. And so I fixed that, and then it was just way quieter. At a standstill, it wouldn't vibrate like crazy, so I didn't need a super high D term to try and get rid of that. But then another improvement I made was I went to Betaflight and I copied their PT1 filter for D-term output, and that made a huge difference. And so now I could crank my D super high, which I like doing because it makes it nice and stiff, and it works really great. So between those two improvements, it's actually incredibly dialed, and with the Vesk's FOC drive mode, it feels so much smoother than any other EUC I've ever written. And then, yeah, we talked about how they had the cutouts, and that was due to the storm core issues. Don't have those anymore. I've got the more power that I want. 200 amps is great. And then another long-standing issue I've been unhappy with the VESC code is the Hall sensor algorithm. And Alex has been working on improving that, and I've been running a branch that he has of the code, and it's much better. I can idle pretty well. You almost don't feel anything on direction changes. It's really solid. Most people don't notice it at all when I let them try it. They're really happy with the performance. And I have to say, I mean, I'm really happy with this vehicle right now. It works great. Although I actually don't like it just because it's heavy and big. So I think I'm going to start working on a smaller 16-inch, very light freestyle but high torque vehicle. That's pretty much it. That's where I'm at right now. Cool. Enjoy.